The note came at midnight in a closed carriage with a woman inside it, and it said, "In discharge of my bond of £9,000, I send your grace the only thing of value in my house. H. Trench." Alaric, 9th Duke of Falkner, read it twice by the light of a hall lamp, and then went out onto the steps of Falkner Chase in his shirt sleeves, in a Yorkshire December, to see whether a man could actually have done such a thing. A man had. The carriage was Trench's own, mud to the axles, the coachman already turning. There were no boxes on the roof. The woman was standing at the foot of the steps in the snow in a thin cloak and house shoes, with a paper parcel under one arm and nothing else in the world, and she was looking up at him with the steadiest gray eyes he had ever been looked at with. "Get that carriage stopped," said Alaric. "It will not stop," she said. "I have already tried. Sir Hugo told the man that if he brought me back, he would be turned off without his character, and he has 5 children, and he has been crying since Northallerton." "Who are you?" "Rowan Mead. I have kept Sir Hugo Trench's letter books for 4 years and his accounts for 3, and I have been in that house since I was 16. She did not curtsy. She did not simper. She stood in 6 inches of snow in house shoes and said, "Your Grace, I have read the note." He let me read it. That was part of it. Alaric came down the steps. He had been 11 years a duke and 6 years a man with one purpose, and he could count on one hand the number of times he had been genuinely at a loss. He was at a loss now, standing in his own snow, with the note in his fist and 40 windows of his house lit behind him, and a woman in front of him who had been sent to him like a hamper of game. "Come inside," he said. "I am not coming inside as that." "As what?" "As payment," said Rowan Mead. They stood in the snow and looked at one another. "Miss Mead," said the Duke of Falkner, "in the whole of my life I have never held a human being to be property, and I have destroyed 2 men for taking a different view. You are cold, and it is midnight. There is a fire in the yellow parlor, and there is a housekeeper called Mrs. Sowerby, who has been up since 5, and is at present listening at the green baize door with her cap on crooked. You will come in as a guest in my house, you will eat something, and at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning you may tell me where in England you wish to be taken, and I will take you there and pay for it, and the bond of £9,000 remains exactly where it was, which is round Sir Hugo Trench's neck." He held out his hand for the parcel. "That is the whole of it. There is no 5th clause." Rowan Mead looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then she said, "You have not asked me what is in the parcel." "It is your linen." "It is not my linen," she said. "It is why he sent me." Mrs. Sowerby had a fire, and mutton broth, and a great deal to say later about the state of the girl's feet, which she reported to the whole servants' hall the following morning with a face like a hatchet. Alaric sat opposite his uninvited guest in the yellow parlor, with the door standing wide open into the hall, because he had thought about that for the length of the passage, and had decided that the door would stand open in every room he was ever in with her, for as long as she was under his roof. She ate the broth. She ate all of it and then apologized for it, which he did not like. "Miss Mead, explain your parcel." She unwrapped it on the table. 9 stitched paper books of the kind clerks use, closely written in a small upright hand, and a bundle of letters tied with tape. "Sir Hugo cannot write a fair hand and will not learn," she said. "For 4 years every letter that left that house went out in my writing, and every letter of consequence was entered in a copybook by me before it went, because that is what a letter book is for, and he was very proud of having one, because gentlemen of business have them." Her hands were quite steady on the covers. "He kept the books in the study press. 2 years ago he began keeping certain letters out of them. Those he dictated to me in the evening, and burned in front of me, and told me I was a good girl. Alaric had gone very still. "Miss Mead, what is your memory like?" "It is why he took me in," said Rowena Mead, "and it is why he has sent me away, and it is why he thinks he is safe in doing it." She turned the first book round to face him. "Your Grace, my father was Captain Josiah Mead. He was Sir Hugo's partner in 3 ships. He died in the year 16 owing everything he had to Sir Hugo, who had cheated him for 9 years, and Sir Hugo took me out of charity in front of the whole town of Caudil, and I have never once in 7 years been paid a wage or given a key." Her voice was even. It was the evenness of something held down with both hands. "I have written out from memory every burned letter I ever took down. I began it 2 years ago. It has taken me 111 nights, and I have kept it in a hole under the 3rd stair of the back passage. And this evening, when he told me what he meant to do with me, I went and got it, because he was too pleased with himself to watch me." Alaric turned the first page. The room went a long way off. Snow ticked at the window. 3 letters in, he came to the name of a ship. He read it and read the sentence twice, and set the book down flat on the table with a care that he was aware of being excessive, and got up and walked to the window and stood with his back to the room until he could be trusted. "The Lark," he said. "Yes. You know what she was. She was a brig of 210 tons, condemned by a surveyor at Whitby in the spring of the year 17 as unfit, and passed by a second surveyor called Pelling 9 days later for a fee of 80 guineas, and insured for 4,100 with the Northern Marine on the strength of Pelling's paper," said Rowena Mead. "And she sailed for Riga in the October, and broke up on the Dogger in the November with all hands but 2, and there were 41 men aboard her. And one of them was a gentleman passenger, and his name was Lord Peregrine Falkner, and he was your brother. And I have known that since I was 17 years old, and I have not been able to prove one word of it until tonight." Alaric Falkner stood at the window of his own parlor with his hands behind his back, and did not move for a long time. 6 years. 6 years of buying paper. He had bought Trench's bonds and Trench's mortgages and Trench's bills the way other men bought pictures, patiently, at a premium, from anybody who would sell. He had made himself the sole creditor of a man he could not touch, and he had waited, and he had never once been able to lay his hand on the single sheet that would put Hugo Trench in front of a jury for the murder, because that was the word, whatever the law called it, of 41 men. And Trench had just sent it to him in a closed carriage, in house shoes, to make a joke. "He does not know what you have," Alaric said. "He knows I have a memory, and he thinks a woman's memory is a parlor trick. He would not credit that I could write out 4 years. Rowena's chin lifted. "He sent me because he could not pay you, and because he wanted you to be disgusted. He said," she stopped. "Say it." "He said, Falkner has spent 6 years being righteous about my ships. Let us see how righteous he is at midnight with a girl on his doorstep and no witnesses." The fire cracked. Alaric felt something move in him that was much older and much simpler than the 6 years of paper, and he put it away, carefully, because it was no use to her. "Miss Mead," he said, "at 9 o'clock tomorrow you may tell me where you wish to go." "I have nowhere to go, and you know it." "Then hear the offer and do not be polite about it." He came back to the table. "You are 23. You are the best clerk I have ever met, and my own letter books are a scandal. I will engage you as my amanuensis at £80 a year, paid quarterly in advance, the first quarter on the table before breakfast. You will have the East Chamber and its key in your own hand. There is a woman of my mother's family, Lady Adela Cranmore, who is 66 and lives 11 miles off and is dying of boredom. She will be in this house by 4 tomorrow, and she will not leave it while you are in it, and she is the greatest gossip in the North Riding, which is exactly what I want, because within a week every soul in 3 counties will know that there is a chaperone under this roof." He set the note from Trench on the table between them. "And that will be burned in that grate by you, not by me. Tonight, it is the only paper in this business I have any right to destroy." Rowena Meade looked at the note. Her hand shook for the first time all evening. "Why the key?" she said. "Because you have not had one in 7 years." She got up and took the note to the fire and put it in, and stood watching it go with her arms folded across herself. "Your Grace," she said, "I want you to understand something before I take your 80 pounds, because you are a duke and you are angry, and both of those things make men clumsy." She turned round. "I did not carry those books out of that house to be rescued. I carried them out to hang him. If you help me, we shall be doing the same work, and I shall be glad of it. But I am not a debt, and I am not a poor creature in the snow, and I am not the last piece of your brother's inquest." Her eyes were bright and hard. "I am the witness." Alaric Falkner, who had been called cold and ruthless, and a good deal worse in every club from York to St. James's, and who had earned most of it, inclined his head to her exactly as he would have to a man who had told him a truth. "Miss Meade," he said, "at 9 o'clock we will begin." Lady Adela Cranmore arrived at 3:30 the next day with 4 trunks, a parrot, and an opinion. £9,000, she said in the middle of the hall at volume. "A man sends a young woman across 3 counties in a snowstorm in house shoes to settle a card debt, and it is Christmas in a fortnight. Alaric, you were quite right to send for me, and I shall never let you forget it. Where is she?" "In the library, copying." "Then I shall go and be charming, and you will keep out of the way." His mother's cousin fixed him with a look that had frightened 3 generations. "And Alaric, you will marry her or you will not, and either is respectable, but you will not do the third thing, which is to hover about her for a year looking noble and never speak. Your father did that to your mother, and it took him 9 years. "There is no third thing," said Alaric. "There is a hearing to prepare." Said Lady Adela. The winter went into the work. It was the strangest 6 weeks of his life, and he understood, long afterwards, that they were also the best he had had since the year 17. They worked in the library from 9 until 2, with the door open and Lady Adela and the parrot installed at the far end in a wing chair. And every afternoon at 3, they walked, because Alaric had discovered on the 4th day that Rowena Meade had not been out of doors for pleasure in 7 years and had, on being told she might go where she liked, stood in the middle of the terrace for a full minute as though waiting for someone to call her back. They walked the moor road and the frozen carriage drive, and once, in January, out onto the ice of the fish pond with Mrs. Sowerby shouting from the bank. And Rowena went down flat on her back, laughing so hard that she could not get up. And Alaric hauled her to her feet and did not immediately let go of her hands. That was the 14th of January. He remembered the date. The work itself was pitiless. 9 copybooks, 4 years, the burned letters set down from memory, and every one of them requiring corroboration before any of it would be worth a shilling in front of a jury. Rowena was ruthless with her own evidence. "That one will not do," she said, again and again. "That is my hand and only my hand. He will say I invented it in this house to please you. We need the other end of it." So they went and got the other ends. The Northern Marine Assurance at Hull, which had paid £4,100 in the year 18, and had never been happy about it, opened its files to a duke in 9 minutes, and produced Pelling's certificate dated, sealed, and when laid beside Rowena's copybook, matching the letter that had been dictated and burned in a study in caudal to the day and to the phrase. Mr. Silas Pelling himself was found in a lodging in Scarborough, 61 years old, with a cough that would not see the spring, drinking. It took Alaric 2 visits. On the second, Pelling wept and asked whether it was true that a gentleman had gone down in her. And Alaric said that it was, and that he had been 24 years old and had been going out to look at timber. And Silas Pelling signed 11 pages before a Scarborough attorney and 2 witnesses, and asked, at the end, whether he might have the gentleman's name to say over. And the ship's carpenter, John Chettle, one of the 2 men off the Dogger, was traced to a brother's cottage at Staithes and could not write and did not need to. He told a magistrate's clerk plainly that the Lark had been making 11 inches an hour off Flamborough on a fair day, and that he had said so to the master, and that the master had said the owner knew all about it. By the first week of February there was a case, and there was a man in Hull who had waited 6 years to bring it, and there was a date. The Yorkshire Lent Assizes at York, the 8th of March. There was also, by the first week of February, a great deal of talk. It came back to him first from his own steward, and then from Lady Adela, who reported it at dinner with grim relish because she had decided he must hear the worst of it. They are saying that Trench sent her, and that you kept her, and that the chaperone is a screen and I am a paid old fool, she said. They are saying that a young woman who was carried to a bachelor's house at midnight is what she plainly is, whatever anybody puts about. Mrs. Ilbert of Thorelby has told her whole dinner table that no respectable house in the Riding can receive her, and Trench's attorney has been at pains to see that every word of it reaches Hull before the assizes, because if she is a kept woman, then her copybooks are a kept woman's spite. Alaric put down his knife. Where is she? Upstairs. She has heard it. Mrs. Sowerby's niece brought it up from the village this morning, and had the sense to tell her rather than let her walk into it. He found her on the landing window seat with the copybooks in her lap and the moor going blue outside, and she looked up at him and said, before he could speak, "Do not offer to marry me." Alaric stopped where he was. "Miss Mead." "You were going to. I have watched you decide things for 6 weeks and I know the face." Her hands were flat on the books. "Your Grace, if you marry me in February, a duchess of 3 weeks' standing walks into York in March and swears to 9 copybooks, and Trench's counsel stands up and says, 'Gentlemen, she wrote them for him. He bought her with a coronet, and here is the bill of sale.' It would hang the case round my neck and let him walk out into the sunshine." Her voice did not break. "And I have spent 7 years being a thing given away to settle a man's account. I will not be given away to save one, even by you, even if I wanted it." Alaric stood in the cold of the landing and understood 2 things in the same instant: that she was entirely right, and that she had said even if she wanted it, and that she was looking very hard at the window. "Then we shall be talked about," he said. "We shall be talked about until the 8th of March, said Rowena Mead. "And after the 8th of March I shall take my £80 and go to Whitby and teach in a school, and they may talk about that instead." "Whitby." "There is a school there and a widow who will have me. I wrote a fortnight ago." She stood up and gathered the books against her. "Your Grace, I have been in this house 9 weeks, and it is the first place I have ever been where a door had a key on my side of it, and I am not able to talk about that yet, so please do not make me." She went along the passage. Alaric stood at the window until the moor went from blue to black. Trench moved on the 22nd of February, and he moved twice. The first was an information sworn at Northallerton, that Rowena Mead, spinster, lately of Caudill, had absconded from the house of her guardian and protector on the 9th of December, having taken with her £300 in notes from a study press together with divers books and papers the property of Sir Hugo Trench, Baronet, and that she was harboured at Falkner Chase. A constable and a clerk came up the drive in the snow on the 24th with a warrant, and were shown into the yellow parlor, and were extremely unhappy. Theft to the value of £300 was not a fine. It was 7 years beyond the sea. Alaric read the warrant standing at the fire with the constable's hat in his own hands, because the poor man had not known what to do with it. "And if she is taken up," he said, "she is in Northallerton jail until the assizes, and she gives her evidence on the 8th of March as a prisoner under charge of felony, in the same gown, with a jailer at her elbow." "That be the way of it, your grace," said the constable miserably. The second move came in the same post, in a private letter, in the hand of Trench's attorney, but in Trench's own voice. An intimation that Sir Hugo would consider the whole disagreeable business at an end, the bond satisfied, and the information withdrawn, upon the return of his ward and his property, and that his grace would surely agree that a gentleman's affairs were better not aired at York. Alaric Falkner read that letter, and something in him that he had been holding on a short rein for 6 years slipped it. He was still standing at the fire an hour later, with the letter burned and his own writing case open and a sheet half covered, when Rowena came in and read what he had written over his shoulder without asking, which nobody in that house would have dared to do. It was an instruction to his London bankers. It was 3 lines long. It called in, on demand, and simultaneously, every bond, bill, and mortgage of Hugo Trench's that the Duke of Falkner had spent 6 years buying, including the mortgage on the alum works at Caudill. 300 men work in that alum house, said Rowena. 311. And 100 more in the carding and the barrels, and the town has nothing else, and if it shuts in March, they will be on the road by May. She came round in front of him. "Your Grace, look at me. You would put the whole of Caudill in the road to make Hugo Trench feel it for a week. He has sworn a felony against you." "Yes." 7 years, Rowena, beyond the sea. "Yes," she said, "and if you sign that paper, then in 5 years there will be men in Caudill telling their sons that the Duke of Falkner shut the alum works and starved the town, and not one of them will remember why. That is what you would leave. Not a hanged man, a hungry town, and your brother's name at the bottom of it." Her voice shook now at last, and she let it. "He drowned 41 men for £4,000, and you are proposing to break 300 families to be even with him. And Alaric, you will not survive being the man who did that. I have watched a man be eaten by his own ledger for 7 years. I am not going to sit in this room and watch it happen to you." It was the first time she had used his name. Alaric Falkner looked down at the 3 lines in his own hand, and for the space of perhaps 10 seconds, wanted to sign them more than he had ever wanted anything. Then he tore the sheet across and across again, and dropped it in the fire, and stood watching it curl with his jaw set and his eyes stinging in a way he did not intend to explain to anybody. "Then we do it properly," he said, "and we do it in 11 days. Miss Mead, go and get your parcel and every scrap of paper in this house, and send for Mrs. Sowerby and the constable, and I will write to Hull." He turned. "And then I want the note." "He made me burn it." "Not that note," said Alaric, "the coachman." Ned Yarker had been Hugo Trench's coachman for 19 years, and had cried from Northallerton to Falkner Chase. And when Alaric's man found him at his sister's at Thirsk, he had, folded inside his hatband, the written order he had been given on the 9th of December, in Trench's own hand, because a coachman who takes a young woman out of a house at night without an order in his pocket is a coachman who ends on the treadmill, and Ned Yarker was not a fool. It said, "Yarker, carry Miss Mead to Falkner Chase in the riding, deliver her at the door with my note, and do not bring her back on any account. H.T." Alaric read it in the library with Rowena standing at his shoulder, and felt the whole case close like a hand. She did not go to Northallerton jail. He would not permit it, and he did not need to be clever about it. On the 26th of February, Miss Rowena Mead walked into the magistrate's parlor at Thirsk of her own accord, in a good grey gown of Lady Adela's providing, and surrendered to the warrant, and the Duke of Falkner entered into a recognizance of £2,000 for her appearance, and Lady Adela Cranmore entered into another for 500, which she declared to be the most interesting money she had ever risked. She was bylaid in 11 minutes. She slept that night in a bed with a key on her own side of the door. York on the 8th of March was a very long day. The theft died first, and it died badly for the man who had brought it. Trench's counsel opened it in 8 minutes and never recovered them. There were no £300. Sir Hugo Trench's own cash book, produced by his own clerk under subpoena, showed no such sum in the press in December, and the cash book itself was in Rowena Mead's handwriting up to the 9th of that month, which the jury was invited to consider. The divers books and papers, the property of Sir Hugo Trench, were laid on the table. They were 9 stitched clerk's books, bought at a stationer's in Caudle by Miss Mead with money given her at Christmas, written entirely in her own hand, and as she told the court in a voice that carried to the back of the gallery, "They are not his letters, my lord. They are my memory of his letters. He burned his." Mrs. Bykerdike, housekeeper at Caudle for 22 years, deposed that Miss Mead had received no wage in 7 years, had never been given a key to any room including her own, and had left the house on the 9th of December in house shoes, and a summer cloak with a paper parcel under her arm, and nothing whatever else. And Ned Yarker, standing in the box turning his hat over and over, read out his order, and then was asked by the judge whether anything had been said to him at the time. "Aye, my lord. He said to leave her on the steps whether they took her in or not." The judge looked at Sir Hugo Trench for a long moment over his spectacles, and said nothing at all, which was worse than anything he might have said, and directed the jury that the prosecution had wholly failed, and they did not leave the box. Then the Crown called the case that the Northern Marine Assurance had waited 6 years to bring. It took from noon until nearly 8 in the evening. Alaric sat through all of it in the second row, and afterwards could remember it only in pieces. Silas Pelling, 61, coughing into a handkerchief between his answers, saying 80 guineas out loud 4 times because counsel made him, and then, unprompted at the end of his evidence, turning to the bench and asking whether he might be permitted to say that he had thought of the gentleman passenger every day for 6 years. John Chettle the carpenter, who could not read the oath and had it read to him, saying that the Lark had made 11 inches an hour off Flamborough in fair weather, and that he had told the master, and the master had said the owner knew. The Northern Marine's own file, letter by letter, laid beside a clerk's copybook in a small upright hand, matching to the day and to the phrase, until even the gallery had stopped whispering. And Rowena Mead in the box for 1 hour and 50 minutes, taken through the whole of it by the Crown, and then handed to a counsel of great reputation who tried, for 40 minutes, everything: that she was a discarded woman, that she was a duke's creature, that she had written 9 books of lies in a warm library to pay a man back for taking a penniless orphan out of the gutter. She answered every question. She did not weep and she did not sneer. "You were dependent upon Sir Hugo Trench for 7 years. I was employed by him for 7 years, and not paid. You are dependent upon the Duke of Falkner now. I am paid by him quarterly in advance, and I have my own key. It is a different arrangement. You hate Sir Hugo." "No, sir," said Rowena Mead. "I hated him for a long while. I find since December that I have almost no feeling about him whatever, which I did not expect, and which I would not have believed a year ago. 41 men went into the North Sea. My feelings are not the point, and they are not evidence, and you may have them if you want them, but you will not get anything useful out of them. Alaric watched 12 men in the jury box look at her, and knew, from that moment, exactly how the day would end. The verdict came in at 8:15. Hugo Trench was convicted, and the sentence, when it was passed, was long enough that a man of 58 might reasonably read it as the whole of the rest of his life. And the Northern Marines' action for the recovery of £4,100 followed him into the wreckage of his estate within the month, along with a good many other people. He turned in the dock as they took him down and found Alaric in the second row and said loudly, so that the gallery would hear it, "You will meet me for this, Falkner. You have not the courage. Name your friends." The whole court looked at the Duke of Falkner. 6 years earlier he would have named them before the man finished speaking. He had rehearsed it in the dark for 6 years. A field, a gray morning, the thing done with his own hand. Alaric stood up, because a man should stand to say a thing like that. "No," he said, "you are asking me for the one death you could be proud of, and I have decided not to give it to you. You will go where the law is sending you, and in 11 years nobody will say your name, and that will be considerably worse." He picked up his hat. "And I shall tell you the last of it since you have asked in public. The alum works at Caudill is mortgaged to me. I was advised in February to call it in and shut it and put your town in the road to be even with you, and I very nearly did. And a woman you sent across 3 counties in house shoes to insult me stood in my library and would not let me." He inclined his head. 311 men will be at work in Caudill on Monday, Trench, and they will owe it to Miss Mead, and you may think about that for as long as you like. He went out through the crowd in the corridor with Lady Adela on his arm, and did not look back. And behind him, the gallery was making the sound that galleries make. The alum works went into trust in April. £940 of Falkner money in the first year, a manager out of Whitby. The men's wages secured against the works and not against the owner, and 3 trustees, of whom one was a duke, one was an attorney from Hull, and one was a spinster of 23 whose name went on the deed in her own hand. Mrs. Ilbert of Thorelby called at Falkner Chase on the 11th of April, with 2 daughters and a great deal of warmth, having read the whole of the York proceedings in the newspaper, and was received by Lady Adela Cranmore, who kept her 40 minutes, said nothing uncivil, and enjoyed herself very much. Rowena had gone to Whitby on the 4th. She went as she had said she would, with £80 and the rest of her quarter, and a box that Mrs. Sowerby had packed with a great deal of muttering, to a widow named Mrs. Prust, and a school of 19 girls in a house on the West Cliff. And she did not make a speech about it, and Alaric did not ask her to stay, because he had understood by then that the entire meaning of her going was that she was free to go. He gave it 5 weeks. It was the longest and worst thing he had ever done deliberately. He came up the cliff on the 12th of May, in the afternoon, on foot from the harbor, and found her in the yard behind the school, with her sleeves pinned back, teaching 19 girls to lay out a page of accounts on a slate. She saw him over their heads, and went absolutely still. "Miss Prust," said Rowena, "take them in." They went in. Somebody looked back 4 times. "Your Grace." "Alaric." "Alaric," she said, and her voice did what it had not done at York. He had brought 2 things, and he gave her the first one first, because he was not going to have any doubt about the order of them. A copy of the trust deed of the Caudill Alum Works, engrossed and sealed, with 3 trustees named on the face of it and her name in the middle. "That is yours," he said, "and it is not a gift. and it has nothing whatever to do with the other thing. You will be sent the accounts 4 times a year for as long as you live, and you will find at least one error in every set, because the manager is an optimist." Rowena looked at the deed for a long time. "And the other thing?" "The other thing," said the Duke of Falkner, "is that you were carried to my door in December to be a payment, and you have been the only person in 9 years who has told me the truth at a cost to herself. And you stood in my library on the 22nd of February and stopped me from becoming the man I have been hunting since the year 17. He put his hat on the wall because his hands were not steady, and he had decided not to pretend about it. You said in February that if I asked you then, it would hang the case round your neck. The case is over. Trench is in a hulk at Sheerness. You are a trustee of an alum works and a schoolmistress with a wage and a key, and nobody in England can say now that you were given to anybody." He stopped. "So I am asking, not as a rescue, as an equal, and rather badly, and after 5 weeks in which I have got nothing done at all." Rowena set the deed down on the wall beside his hat. "They will still say it," she said. "The Duke who married the woman sent to him as payment. For a season. Forever, in some drawing rooms." "Then let them say it in some drawing rooms," said Alaric, "while you and I are at Caudle correcting the manager." He took a breath. "Rowena, my brother was 24 and he went out to look at timber, and he has been the only thing in my life for 6 years. You are the first thing that has come after him. I did not think there was going to be an after." She crossed the yard. She did it quickly in the end, the way she did everything once she had decided, and put both arms round him in the open in front of 19 girls at 19 windows, and said into his coat, "Yes, yes, you are a very slow man, and it has been 5 weeks, and I have been correcting the school's coal bill every night to stop myself writing to you. You might have written." "I very nearly did 4 times," said Rowena. "The 4th one was 6 pages and I burned it, and I have burned quite enough paper for one lifetime, so you had better not make me do it again." They were married in Whitby at the end of June, in the church on the cliff, with Mrs. Prust and 19 girls in the gallery, Lady Adela Cranmore in puce and tears, Mrs. Sowerby in the 3rd pew, and Ned Yarker, who had been given a place in the Falkner stables in March, and a cottage for his 5 children in April, standing at the back with his hat in his hands, weeping again, and unashamed of it. On the cliff above the harbor that autumn, a stone was set up by the Duke and Duchess of Falkner with 41 names cut into it, in the order of the ship's book, from the master to the boy, and Lord Peregrine Falkner's among them in no larger letters than the rest. And a fund was settled the same year for the families of drowned men out of Whitby and Staithes, and it was administered from Falkner Chase in a small upright hand, and it was still paying out 90 years later. Alaric never entirely lost the habit of the open door. It amused her for years. But there was one thing he did keep, and she found it 11 years afterwards in the drawer of his writing case, while she was looking for sealing wax. The key to the east chamber at Falkner Chase, on a bit of tape, with the date of the 9th of December written on a paper round it in his own hand. She stood in the study with it in her palm for a while. Then she put it back exactly as she had found it, and said nothing about it that day or any other, because there are some things a woman does not need to have explained to her, and because he was out on the terrace at that moment with their son on his shoulders, showing him the moor.